Matic, Polygon Matic looks very expensive, unfortunately. This cannot necessarily be seen on the US dollar chart, but once we look at, for example, the relative valuation to Bitcoin, things are not as pretty. In this video, we're going to look at the relative valuation to Bitcoin, Ethereum, also to BNB, because Matic and the Binance Smart Chain is somewhat competing for a similar audience. Let's also look at Matic relative to Cardano, to Phantom, and to Avalanche. Basically, the battle of the layer 1 competitors, who makes the race in the smart contract game. First things first, Matic relative to Bitcoin, that's the most common of the relative valuation charts. Now here is why I like relative valuation charts so much. Very often we get relatively constant trading ranges because money tends to flow from one altcoin to the next. It tends to flow from risk on to risk off. Sometimes Bitcoin is in favor, sometimes Matic is in favor. And there is a certain predictability, as in when Matic might be expensive and when Matic might be comparatively cheap. Where is currently the momentum going? Currently, at least relative to Bitcoin, Matic isn't doing too great. Now this is very common for a lot of altcoins simply because Bitcoin was outperforming everything. With the banking crisis, people are looking for a safe haven in traditional finance, that's gold. In the crypto world, that's Bitcoin. And so for a lot of altcoins, we currently see a recent underperformance. The issue is simply just this trading range, and very rarely do we turn around within that range. There was one turnaround in January of this year, but usually we really move from the extreme bottom to the top, vice versa. The current potential underperformance versus Bitcoin is still minus 45%. I am saving those predictions over here. So next time we're going to look at Matic, we can see how this plays out. The last prediction went pretty well. Now let's look at Matic relative to ETH. The reason why this is interesting is because Ethereum is basically the main layer 1. Right? Officially, Polygon Matic is just a scaling solution to Ethereum, but in practice, it's really its own blockchain. When you've got an NFT on Matic, you can't just transfer it to regular Ethereum and vice versa. Matic is basically a cheap kind of ETH. So here, also in the past, this worked out relatively accurately. The potential risk here is very similar to Bitcoin, minus 47%. The potential reward maybe 25%, or in the very positive case, plus 48%. Now, how is it possible that this downside is 48%, 47%, the upside as well, but the price itself looks like it's way higher than in the middle of this range? That's because of the logarithmic scale, right? Once we go to the linear scale, this is pretty much in the middle. But on a logarithmic scale, we are not looking at dollar changes, we are looking at relative changes. So a change from here to here, for example, which is 500%, is very similar to a change of the same magnitude over here, 500%. So the vertical deltas stay consistent with the relative price changes. This is very different to a linear scale, where it's not the percentage changes, but the US dollar changes. And so what's the most likely here? Doesn't take rocket science, but I do expect also Matic to underperform ETH. Now it's interesting to look at what's going to happen in the next week or two, if we do actually see a bounce, because we have seen once this turnaround at the end of January of this year, similar to the Bitcoin chart. I don't see a sudden rally in Matic, but it's definitely worth watching what happens in the next few days. It is a pretty decisive moment right now. Now BNB is currently struggling a lot. That's because Binance and CZ just got sued by the CFTC, but still Matic wasn't able to outperform even the poorly performing BNB. Look at this. This is BNB relative to Bitcoin. And this is very, very constantly underperforming. And with the recent legal issues, even more so. But Matic is even doing worse. Again, a very constant sidewards trading range. And this is what I don't like about Matic right now. The current momentum is negative, and still we are pretty far away from a potential support. Here we've got Matic relative to Cardano. And this is interesting because this is one of the first charts where we really see a constant outperformance. Cardano is doing pretty poorly. The project is struggling with quite a few technical issues, scalability issues, etc. There isn't a lot of adoption in terms of decentralized app usage. And so, say since April of 2021, we just take now the middle points of this trend, to today, we are up by more than 200% relatively speaking. There is quite a bit of volatility though, so if you don't time this correctly, you can still see yourself in an underperformance versus ADA of 62%. So it really does make sense to shift the assets from whatever is currently hyped to whatever is currently undervalued. Also here, unfortunately, even though Matic tends to outperform long term, it's not yet at all at any reasonable point to prefer the token over Cardano, unfortunately. Let's look at Matic to Phantom. And Phantom had its fair share of drama, Andre Cronje leaving, the blockchain getting very much to its limits in terms of scalability. The ups and downs can be pretty erratic. Bottom to top here is 2000% even. So these moves are way more pronounced than for the other relative valuation charts that we have seen so far. There is, again, a lot of risk, 83% even, maybe 88%, the potential outperformance, 80% or 150%. I'm a fan of trying to buy rather low, trying to sell rather high, trying to ride those waves. I'm a fan of looking at these relative valuation charts and take this seriously. There is a certain pool of crypto money and crypto traders are running in line with the narrative of the day. It's not necessarily that the overall crypto expansion is the strongest influence on those prices, even on the US dollar price. I think the main influence really, especially in a market that's not growing as quickly anymore than 3 or 4 years ago, the main driver is really where currently the attention is. And unfortunately, the valuations in relative terms tend to still be relatively high, whereas attention tends to rather go down relative to Bitcoin, Ethereum, BNB, and potentially even Cardano, definitely Phantom as well. Last but not least, Matic versus AVAX. Not as clear of a sideways trading range, but definitely also not cheap. You could even look at something like Matic dominance. So how much of all of crypto is currently locked up in Matic? So that's 0.87%. And there seems to be somewhat of a ceiling, right? The growth is really slowing down. And given that the relative valuation to other cryptocurrencies is relatively high, I'm not sure if there's really enough upside for the potential downside. These are all relative valuations, right? So this is looking at what cryptocurrency makes sense to hold versus others. This is not necessarily a statement regarding the US dollar valuation. When Bitcoin rises to 30, 40, 50K, of course Matic will be above $1.04. The question though is, would Ethereum even do better? Would BNB even do better? Would Cardano potentially outperform? If the answer to this is yes, then why get idiosyncratic exposure to the Matic token? Why not be invested in another cryptocurrency that's currently not losing momentum? I made a pretty extensive discussion around Bitcoin, where I currently see Bitcoin going, and this does obviously have an impact on Matic as well. For that Bitcoin discussion, feel free to check out this video over here. Looking forward to see you in that video, and thanks for watching this one. Bye bye.